at a time that is kind of weirding even me out. Thank you very much for putting me out about that, Chris. And good luck with Ted freaking Cruz. That's going to be amazing. I think it'll be interesting. A lot happened this week. We'll see what happens. All right, thank you, my friend. Good luck. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. It's a Friday, so you know what that means. We have so very much news to get to tonight. It does feel like sort of gigantic pieces of news are calving off from a glacier somewhere and splashing into an ocean that is already filled with other gigantic news stories. We are having another one of those nights. If you have been following the impeachment proceedings over these past 4 days, if you have been following the whistleblower complaint over the president's dealings with Ukraine, the president basically trying to involve Ukraine in helping himself get reelected in 2020. One of the big revelations from that whistleblower complaint that was unsealed yesterday, oh my God, was that only yesterday, was the claim that this was, quote, not the first time under this administration that a transcript of a presidential call had been placed into a code word level high security system solely for the purpose of protecting politically sensitive information, even though that code word protected secure database is only supposed to be holding national security sensitive information. The whistleblower was basically claiming that after this very worrying phone call in which the president, we now know, asked Ukraine to help him in his re-election effort against his potential opponent, Joe Biden, we know that that happened. We know that the whistleblower got it on good authority that that call had happened, described it basically exactly along the lines of what we eventually saw when the transcript of that call came out. But when the whistleblower complaint itself was unsealed yesterday, it was a big surprise for us to learn this very specific description of how White House officials, including White House lawyers, had tried to cover it up. They had taken the record of that presidential phone conversation and not put it on the server where information like that would be regularly stored. They instead put it in a very, very, very high security, code word protected, top level, standalone security system that's not networked to any other thing, apparently just for the purpose of limiting the ability of other people inside the government to see what happened on that phone call. Not because it was national security sensitive, not because it was about some covert action or some code word protected intelligence program, but simply because they had to make sure that nobody could find out that the president had done this on this call. Again, the whistleblower saying in the whistleblower's complaint that according to U.S. officials, according to White House officials who had talked to the whistleblower about this matter, this was not the first time White House officials and White House lawyers had taken a step like that, to hide, essentially, to bury records of a presidential phone call with a foreign power. And that, of course, teed up this big question. Well, what else is in the vault? What else have they hidden on that server? What else has this White House tried to lock down? What other evidence of the president's behavior or transcripts of the president's calls have they tried to wall off from access, even from most U.S. officials and cabinet-level officials, not because they were national security sensitive, but because they would make the president look bad, because they reflected the kind of behavior that might get the president impeached. Well, just before we got on the air, just moments ago, the Washington Post published this new scoop, having to do with not the phone call to the Ukrainian president, which has led to the impeachment proceedings this week, but rather the infamous meeting that took place in the Oval Office in 2017 between President Trump and two senior officials from Russia. This was May 2017. It was the day after Donald Trump fired James Comey. And you'll remember, surprise, what's the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador doing in the Oval Office with the president that day? Well, here's what the Washington Post is reporting now. Quote, President Trump told Russian officials, President Trump told two senior Russian officials in a 2017 Oval Office meeting that he was unconcerned about Moscow's interference in the U.S. election in 2016 because the United States did the same in other countries, an assertion that prompted alarmed White House officials to limit access to the president's remarks to an unusually small number of people, the Post citing three former officials with knowledge of the matter. Quote, a memorandum summarizing the meeting was limited to all but a few officials with the highest security clearances in an attempt to keep the president's comments from being publicly disclosed. According to this new story in the Washington Post, President Trump lamented to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, quote, that all this Russia stuff, as he put it, was detrimental to relations between the U.S. and Russia. By all this Russia stuff, he means the interference of Russia in our immediately previous election. It is not clear if a memo documenting that May 10, 2017 meeting with Lavrov and Kislyak was placed into that top secret code word protected server where the transcript of the president's call with Ukraine was apparently stashed. But we do know that access to this transcript with the Russian officials from 2017 was, quote, restricted to a very small number of people. You will recall, of course, that this was the meeting in which President Trump not only said that firing James Comey relieved great stress on him, but he also, much to the surprise of U.S. government officials and intelligence officials and our allies, this was the meeting in which Trump revealed highly classified information, code word protected intelligence information that exposed a very sensitive live source of intelligence on ISIS. This was the same meeting in which he admitted that he fired FBI Director James Comey because it relieved great pressure on him. It was the same meeting in which he gave them, one of our allies, incredibly sensitive intelligence sources against ISIS. And apparently, according to the Washington Post tonight, that was also a meeting in which he told the Russian government, told emissaries from the Russian government that he didn't mind what they did in terms of the U.S. election. What is remarkable about this story is that that was May 2017, and we're now finding out more about what was said in that meeting. I mean, we have had a special counsel investigation into the president's interactions with Russia around the Russian election interference in 2016. This never came up. But in the context of the impeachment inquiry, that has started this week into the way the president tried to basically involve the nation of Ukraine in interfering with the next election in 2020. For us to learn that records of that conversation, which have led to the president's eventual impeachment now, records of that conversation were basically hidden away, and that the same treatment or similar treatment of some kind was also used to hide records of that May 2017 Oval Office meeting. I mean, it's stunning what we didn't know before, but it's very stunning what we now know tonight. Joining us now by phone is one of the reporters who is behind this breaking news, Shane Harris. He's an intelligence and national security reporter for the Washington Post, and boy, he has been very busy this week. Mr. Harris, thank you for joining us on short notice.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I appreciate it.
I'm just absorbing this because you guys have just posted it. Let me just first ask you if I got anything wrong there or if I missed any important emphasis in the way I described that.
No, you got it right. That's exactly how we reported it.
In terms of the content, the additional content of the president's conversation with those Russian officials, this is a pretty inflammatory statement to attribute to the president, that he told these Russian officials that he was unconcerned about Moscow's interference in the U.S. election. Your source, you and your colleagues, your source for that, according to the lead in this story, is 3 former officials with knowledge of the matter. Is it your understanding, Shane, that the president's remarks to that effect were included in these notes that were held so closely after this event took place?
That is our understanding because the memorandum that was made documenting this was almost immediately, as it was described to us, restricted to an unusually small number of people. The White House had actually already implemented a system in which these memos of conversations that the president had with foreign leaders are restricted to an even smaller number of people than usual, in large part to avoid press leaks. This one with Lavrov and Kislyak, we're told, was restricted to an even tighter number than was normal. So clearly indicated some real concern on the part of White House officials about the political sensitivities around this. And of course, you also mentioned in this same conversation is where the president revealed information that could have exposed an intelligence source. So this caught a lot of people's attention, I think, when suddenly the paper that you would normally see about this meeting, and remember this is a huge high-profile meeting with Lavrov and Kislyak,